So here we go again. This is Anna Wingate and my friend Laura VanDenHandle. Laura's been a buddy of mine since like 2013 or 14,
Mhm.
and the way I met her, we were at a worship thing called Love Feast, and she's up there worshiping, but her hands are. I'm like, what?
Doing weird things.
Yeah, I'm thinking, what on
What
earth?
is she doing?
Yeah, and the Lord says she's directing the angels. Oh, oh, oh. Anyway, that was brought the curiosity up. I wanted to know this woman, and here it is years later. So, just being girlfriends here a couple weeks ago, we were hanging out and got in this conversation about forgiveness and control. And she said some things that were just light dawning for me. I'm like, oh, I never thought of it like that. But just before we started this recording, we were talking a little bit about, you know, inclination, perception, intuition, those kinds of things, um, and the control issue came up. And so I'm going to tell a bit of a story. So this is the early 90s. And maybe I've told you guys this story before, I don't know. But my roommate was dating a guy, a tremendous Christian man who had an older woman as a mentor.
Mm.
And I really think that those two could have had quite the future. That's my opinion. Doesn't matter now. It's, what, 30 years later. Anyway, they had gone out on this date, and he had, the end of the date, he had taken her to an arboretum, and they sat in the park and talked till 3 o'clock in the morning. So the next morning, I get up, and she and I both have the day off, and she's reflecting on the night before, and she's saying, wow. And she goes, we talked for hours, just absolutely wonderful conversation. And right about then, the phone rings. And it's this woman who's the mentor of this guy. And she says, I saw you. I saw you last night. I saw you in the park. I saw you sitting on a bench underneath a light. And I'm going to tell you right now, you stay away from him. You're not for him. You'll derail him from the ministry.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And hangs up the phone.
Oh,
And I mean, we're young. You
yeah.
know, we're both in shock. But Laura, it's kind of what you said. It was her fear to keep him safe.
On a tether.
Unfortunately, that's spiritual witchcraft.
Yeah.
Spiritual witchcraft is thinking your opinion is God's opinion, and you're going to force or manipulate somebody to
Yeah.
do it. So anyway,
That whole word safety is such a misnomer. I mean, you don't find safety anywhere in the Bible. We talk about being our authentic selves. We talk about God protecting us, but I don't see the word safety at all. And so I can see where that word, for me, when you grow up not feeling safe, um, then you want to find that safety, and you may choose to do some things that are not good in order to do that, and also keeping those who you feel like you need to protect safe. And I really think the root of that is orphan spirit.
really,
You don't have anybody watching over you, so you have to take matters into your own hands, and orphans will do whatever they need to do to survive because they don't have any other resources. They have to rely on themselves.
more so than a spirit of rejection.
Well, don't you think that's tied?
Okay,
Don't you think that an orphan feels
rejected.
rejection? They don't have a sense of belonging. They don't, know who they are. They don't have anybody showing them the way, like a parent would, and so yeah, I really feel like, it's tied. And so we set up these, we you set up these networks, and we see this mirrored in, in the earthly realms, how they have set up this network in all these programs, which is a whole facade of safety. But we do go around our little busy work thinking that we're safe because we're performing all these little things. But are we safe? I don't know, because God has really showed me that we have become such human doings that we don't know how to be who we are. And then that's back to being an orphan. How can we know how to be if we don't know who we are?
So would it also be a reaction to the spirit of fear
Oh, definitely.
at working at trying to be safe?
Yeah, I was ruled by fear. I never knew what was coming. I never ever, and I was trying to be prepared for all scenarios because you just didn't know what was going to happen. So you were always, and see, that's part of how I developed my sensitivity on it, is because I always had my radar per se out all the time. Now, I didn't learn how to navigate that through life. I learned by the example of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I learned to operate that way. And it wasn't until I realized that I was like, okay, God, I don't want to, that's not who I am, and he'd been transitioning me anyway. But, one of the biggest things I've been noticing lately is like, he's going, you're doing it again. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You're doing that behavior, that you're doing what you do not want to do. And I'm firmly believe that when Paul talked about that in the word, it was because of that DNA that we got at the tree. That's the sin. We didn't ask for that sin. That sin was foisted onto us when, Eve and the tree, they did whatever, and our DNA got corrupted. That's that's not that's not something we asked for. So why are we continuing to pay for something which Jesus came and took care of? Um, anyway, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but um, that's the sin that drives you into those behaviors until you recognize, wait a second, that's not who I am. That's not who God made me to be. I don't have to be stuck in that rut anymore, because I can choose to step out of that stuff and step into life. But it's a process of realizing it. And for some of us, it takes a little bit longer to get there. Plus, some of us have had mentors, coaches, and good parents that have helped us. And some of us have just had to kind of find our way. And then we don't trust people. Orphans don't trust.
Yeah.
Because they've been let down so many times. So I really feel God is healing all that emotional stuff, because it's help. It's so we're to run on love. Our energy, our life force, I believe, is love, but we have learned instead to run on fear, or the negative emotions that drive us. And love is our energy, and emotions, I believe, are the spice of life. They add flavor to our lives, but we're not supposed to be eating, sustained by emotional, you know then we have all kinds of issues when we don't know how to release all of that. We get congested from all this emotion, and then we're told, oh, and by the way, don't feel any of it. Which is kind of got us back to that conversation we were having before about forgiveness. That in my religious life, I thought you don't think about it. You just, you're supposed to forgive. They say forgive, you forgive, and it's done, and it's all done. Well, I found out that all I did was detach from the emotion, and I never dealt with it. And I don't really feel like I actually went through the process of forgiveness. I went through the process of forgetting. And it didn't forget it, so I had an encounter with Jesus, and I saw this big area rug. It was a circular, braided rug. And I was well aware that I've been putting junk in my trunk under that rug, sweeping things under the rug. And one day Jesus came and said, "We're rolling the rug up today." And so he rolled up the rug and he helped me start understanding the process of don't detach from your emotions. Feel them and process them, and then release them. It's like I had the cart before the horse. I was told, okay, no matter what anybody's done to you, it doesn't matter because Jesus paid for it. And by gosh, you just have to just forgive. And that's religious baloney, in my opinion, that we are not to be detached from our emotions. We are to learn how to govern and steward them, but we're not supposed to be emotionless beings. I mean, I don't know.
So
That maybe everybody isn't raised that way, but I was raised with, you're not allowed to have any feelings.
I think that was our generation.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, my parents and aunts and uncles, an issue would come up and they're like, we just don't talk about that. And, one of the roots of iniquity is character defect. And that's what that scripture says, iniquity will visit to the third and fourth generation. That's what it's really talking about. And so the character defect in my family was stuff your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And my side of the family, my mother's side of the family, they're just about all professional people. They're a dentist, attorneys, microbiologists, and raving alcoholics because they stuffed their emotions.
Yeah. So they dealt with it how they could figure out how to do. Yeah.
Well, that's why I think EFT, tapping is so important. And it leads into other things. So I went through some tapping. I had this light dawning thing. It's kind of like forgiveness. You think you've dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
And grief. My mother was 43 when she gave
Yeah.
birth to me. So I have seen all my grandparents. I've seen all my aunts and uncles pass away. And a whole bunch of them were gone by the time I was 23. My mom died when I was 23.
Yeah, that's young.
Oh, and I thought I'd dealt with grief. Well,
Yeah.
I went through this tapping thing that was about tapping thing, the way I say that. I went through a series of tappings about grief and realized that this stuff was resonating in my cells.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you talk to Dr. Caroline Leaf or listen to her, she talks about our reactions set our neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And says that our choices affect our DNA. And so realizing this, I went for an energy session with Margaret Beam. If anybody listening, if you're interested, her website is Tuning Into Life. And I just really felt like the trauma from all those deaths were locked up in my cells. And I got to tell you, I not only, instead of trying to shove the grief out of the way, cope with the grief, I accepted the grief. That grief is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But I let go of the trauma in my cells.
Mm-hmm.
I got done with that session. In fact, I need to write her. I felt like, I said to her, I feel global. And I think what I'm saying is I felt whole in a new way.
Uh-huh.
But you're hitting the nail right on the head, Laura. In the midst of that, what you said about safety, I think the only safety we have, and it's mentioned just a few times, is in the Lord and in His provision.
Yeah.
So safety in the land that He has given you.
Yeah.
But the other thing, you made a comment before we started about the kingdom suffers violence and the violence take it by force. Well, if you're going to step into that, you're stepping in by faith because you're looking at conflict in the kingdom, and no violent confrontation is safe unless you're in the right position.
Yep.
Yeah. And girlfriend, you've done a lot of that.
Yeah. And I don't come with weapons drawn. I come with love, like Jesus. See, that's the other thing that I've shifted from. I'm not axing people. I'm not taking out my sword and sticking them, coming from the opposite with love. And so I just had another thing happen yesterday. Um, so, everybody has their opinion about the virus and this and that and the next thing. And I have one sister who's very vocal and feels she has to inform you of every single thing. And while I was working through the process of forgiving and other issues with her in my life, I just couldn't have a relationship with her. And that, but it's healing, and she's not changed, but I have. And so she sent me this text about, you know, vaccines or whatever. And for when she would send me something like that, one, I'd get really mad because it's like, what do you think I am, stupid? I can find this information. And then I would either ignore it or, back when I was feeling very volatile, I would lobby back, and that was wrong. It was not, out of love. And so I found myself able to just say to her simply, thank you for the information. And I send her a little emoji that had a smiley face on it. And it's just like, it's not a battle I need to fight, you know? And that is, a miracle, an absolute miracle that I can actually just go, well, okay, well, thank you. And not have any kind of like, oh my gosh, I got to go down there with my sledgehammer and teach her a lesson, because she's messing me up, you know. So and God has started testing me, or I don't know if you want to call it testing, but He's been challenging me in loving people that have been very difficult to love in my life, and those are the ones that need it. They need love. They I posted something yesterday about don't wish them pain. Those who've caused you pain, don't wish them pain. Wish them, bless them to stepping into the truth. And so yeah, the journey of forgiveness isn't just one and done. It doesn't. I think the church has done a great disservice in institutionalizing our processes versus allowing authentic relationship where people can learn and grow and share and experience and talk about what's bothering them. And there's nothing that you shouldn't be able to talk about. There shouldn't be taboo things where you just can't share. Okay, you don't share with everybody, but everybody needs safe people. Or, and I hate that word, everybody needs understanding people that are not going to judge, that are not going to do this and just help them. That's what I want to do, help people process through where they are instead of shaming them into trying to get them to change their behavior, which is not going to help and not going to solve anything. And that's witchcraft, that's manipulation. you
Yeah.
know that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you grow. It's back to being in control. um so letting, and then for me, letting go, I didn't realize how controlling I was, how, and until I started letting it go. you know um
The analogy I'd give you is like a cigarette smoker.
yeah.
So my three, we used to talk and talk and talk to my husband like, do not sit in the front porch and smoke. People come to the house and guess what they smell. And he's like, oh,
Right.
Well, almost, no, 3 years ago, almost, yeah, almost 3 years ago. No, over 3 years ago. He quit. He's done. I mean, I'm sure most people wish they could have it happen that way, but
Norm was like that. When he
just,
made up his mind, he quit.
but when he was done, he was done. Yeah.
Done.
And then after that, what you said about it, I didn't realize how controlling I was until
Yeah.
I was, same thing. He's like, oh my goodness, I stunk so bad. Yes. The reason you weren't allowed to smoke in the house. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's the same thing. Now, the forgiveness thing for me, um, there was 3 rounds. Doing the inner healing, working in
Hmm.
holistic healing. I don't like that term a lot better than inner healing because it's all of us.
Yeah.
It's not just the inside. I mean, the physical body
Our
needs,
whole being. Yeah.
yeah, it needs to live in health. Well, I think it was like the early 90s. That was a big deal. Forgiveness was a big deal. And the teaching on forgiveness was, um, if you let go, the scar's still there as a memory. Uh, but if you can let go of the pain, and we would think, oh, they're completely healed. No, no, they've just let go of the pain. So the next round was realizing that getting rid of the pain, what it really did is open the door to work with the emotions. And there are times to recalibrate your emotions. I call it trading floor, the trading floor protocol. You let God take your emotions, and then He gives you something back and balances all that out. But then the past few years, there's been this forgiveness without accountability. If you hold somebody accountable, you haven't forgiven them. Yes and no. If they are in your ecclesia, if they are a family member, your child, your teenage child, if your teenage child um, played baseball and put the ball through a neighbor's window, you would hold him accountable, walk him over to the neighbor and say, we're going to work on this together. We're going to solve this problem, and I'm going to, help you raise the money, etc. But you should hold them accountable. Matthew 18. But what happens is when you go to someone, alone, then with somebody else, then in front of the whole, ecclesia. And see, I could never get that scripture because it was back in the day when everybody went to church. How could you bring one person in front of 150, 350 people? But
Hmm.
most ecclesias are family oriented and they're 20 people or less.
Hmm.
Well, if you've talked to them 2 or 3 times, you can bring it up in front of the group, because you're family, and say, listen, you're driving everybody crazy with, we've talked to you about this and you don't realize how serious it is. If they don't listen, then that's when Jesus said, forgive 70 times 7. Well, if you think about that, if you let someone go and they leave the ecclesia and they've got a problem, they probably are hurt, bitter, etc. Why have you got to forgive them 70 times 7? Because the situation keeps coming up. We've had people leave. Not very often have we had somebody really, really bitter, but when they were, it kept coming back to us. And,
Hmm.
it kept opening the wound. Forgive, forgive, forgive. So, uh, it, if they're out of your ecclesia, it's not your job to hold them accountable, but it is your job to continually forgive. And yeah, it's there. Forgiveness has been layers for me, learning what it really, really is. It's not simple. It's not one and done. But what grabbed me, I never, when you brought that up, I never thought about forgiveness and control.
Mhm.
If you're controlling someone, you aren't forgiving them. It's like, what?
No, you don't trust them to either make their own choices or that they're not going to do something that might be, not okay with you or, whatever. Um, and what's the motivation? Most of the time, I think, the motivation is fear that something that is not good is going to happen, so you have to keep the status quo so that make sure that, you know, you keep your ducks. And it's such a lie because you can tape your ducks until forever and that doesn't, it doesn't necessarily help. It's an illusion, that but a pretty strong one because I kept looking for, if I was just doing things right, then all this other stuff wouldn't happen, because that's what I believed at the time. But yeah, this process of forgiving and the layers of it. And now the Lord said to me he said, no shunning. I don't shun, you don't shun. So, um, but he's allowing me to step into these things as I'm ready, because my emotions have been, I'm not a Pollyanna. I've been through a lot of tough stuff, but I still choose to love. you know um I might go through my cranky bit of time and while I work through things, but it's becoming faster and faster, the turnaround. Like when I got that text from my sister yesterday, I just kind of laughed at it and going, okay, I can't ignore this, can I, Jesus? And he goes, nope. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to say back to her? And I just, in the moment, processed it, So it may sound like a really small thing, but when you add that up, the shift mindset and the shift and the change, and you realize, oh, I am healed in this area. I am delivered from this stinking thinking. I am now got the mind of Christ in this area instead of, the stuff that leads to death. And I am so happy that I don't have to be the policeman anymore. I was never called to police people, but I thought I was. And I thought that was discernment. And it wasn't discernment. It was, judgment. Um,
Do you
and
think,
yeah.
do you think it was a generational thing? Do you see it running in your family?
Um, it might be, or it could just be because I grew up in a very dysfunctional, my dad was an alcoholic, and not that he ever admitted that, and other, the background of my other dysfunctional things that go, and you have to basically you learn to keep secrets, because you don't want anybody to know what the truth about what's going on. So you develop all these coping mechanisms, I guess you would call them. I don't know if they're generational or not. I mean, I think that given the same type of behavior, people would probably behave in the same way again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I see it in the next generation where see people that are motivated by fear instead of by, life. And so you know, they're keeping secrets, they're doing whatever, too. So, but maybe more so back then because you weren't. I think it's more um, allowable to talk about your feelings now than it was then. You just suck it up, grin and bear it. Give you something to cry for if you don't stop crying. Kind of. That's the kind of thing I was raised under. And by the time I was in middle school, my dad was so overwhelmed with life, I guess you could say, because I don't know what else to call it. We weren't allowed to make any noise. He just was like, he did not want any noise at all. And we had to be very quiet most of the time, unless it was, loaded. So then he was a happy guy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, all of that stuff, God is doing a really deep healing, I think, um, for all of us, so that we don't carry that baggage into, you know, as we step into, what's coming, uh, that we don't have that, we don't carry that with us anymore. So,
You you've really opened my eyes, especially with regards to. So I turned off my personal or suspended my personal Facebook account.
mhm.
I just I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't
Yeah,
want to hear about the coronavirus. I don't want to hear the politics. I just,
yeah, no, it's all nasty. Yeah.
but it's the issue of all these opinions and people unfriending people. It's all written in unforgiveness, and it it actually is in them before any that unforgiveness is in people before the conversation ever really
Oh
starts.
yeah, the seed is already there. It's
Yeah,
just, it gets sparked. And so one of the things, getting back to, you know, playing, God told me I was playing um hounds and jackals with people. And, I was like, what? I was, making judgments about whether people, if they didn't line up with what I thought or believed or whatever, I would unfollow them, unfriend them or whatever. And I thought I was being discerning. Okay, I don't want to be, but I realized that wasn't discernment, that was judgment. And rooted in unforgiveness, I'm sure, because there were issues there that I hadn't worked through. Plus, if I think I'm responsible for everybody's behavior and I've got to fix it all, and they're being naughty, then I have to fix the naughtiness or ignore the naughtiness. I don't have a lot of choices. But
yeah,
now I know I'm not here to police people. God knows all the naughtiness that they're doing, and He's taking care of it with love.
yeah,
Love covers. Love doesn't expose. Love covers. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is long suffering. And, I don't think most people don't love themselves. If we don't love ourselves, then we can't love anybody else. And I think that's another religious thing that I had to get over, because the church teaches that, even though the word says love yourself as you love your neighbor, somehow there's a missing piece there where you're still supposed to, and then they come with the joy, Jesus, others, yourself. Well, that's not what the word says. The word says love God and love, you know, God first loved us, and then, then we loved, So there's nothing selfish about loving yourself. Um, so I think, getting back to forgiveness, the biggest person most people have to forgive is themselves.
oh, huge, yeah. And then another element is thankfulness. That's just really, um, I'm really, I said it before, I'm really, really into tapping. Tapping is life altering for me. My schedule, especially the first 4 days of the week, my schedule is so demanding. I try and work with all my clients the first 4 days of the week. So the end of the week, I can write lessons, produce videos, and
Mm-hmm.
do things I love like garden. Well,
Yeah.
um, so I do a clearing. I regularly, like Monday, I was just like, this week, especially Monday through Thursday. I mean, I probably had at least 3 and 4 sessions a day. I was looking at the week going, oh, and so start in with the clearing, and I'm okay. I can do it. But the annual tapping summit just happened. And I
Mm-hmm.
cannot remember the guy's one of the speakers, I cannot remember his name. He was like a psychotherapist.
Uh-huh.
They were talking about lifestyle changes and making changes for the better. And he said, get this. He said a key element is thankfulness.
Mm-hmm.
He said if you decide to do short-term fasting, if you go into it with oh, I got to live through this and I can't have that. And he said, you're going to have problems. But if
Yeah.
you go through that and say, I am so thankful for distilled water, and I can have tea, and you know what? I'm going to detox and I'm going to feel better than I've felt in days. And I started thinking, that's so true. But it's also true about this issue of unforgiveness.
Mhm.
If you're wrapped up in thankfulness, you don't have time to be wrapped up in unforgiveness. And, I think that plays into pain levels. I think
Mhm.
you can drop pain levels with thankfulness. And,
Oh, I agree with that because that congestion, if you store it, then it does start, it starts giving you other issues. And yeah, if you start with a poverty mindset about something, you're already behind the gun with whatever you're trying to do. And God's had me, so as he's transitioning for me, I go through these stages of going, okay, I don't know what to do anymore. And so he walks me through it, and he helps me um you know process stuff as I go. I lost what I was going to say. I hate that when that happens. Okay, it's gone. The train has left the station. I know it'll come back, but um looking for, where's life in this? So and how can I enrich the environment that I'm stepping into, and what can I, where's the life in it? And because I was like, well, how do I have a relationship with people who don't agree with me, and be authentic, and not put on any weird things or pretend or whatever. And Jesus says to me, well, how did I do it with you? How did I do it with you? Being patient, meeting me where I'm at, you know. Oh, sometimes he just cracks me up because he's just so blunt.
yeah.
Yeah. What do you think I've been doing for you all this time? Let's have a little grace for the people. you Okay. So, but yes, looking for, I call it looking for love in all the wrong places. We start with that mindset that is dragging us down. And one of the big things that's helped me is realizing the transition from looking at things through the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What a big transition, where God was like, you're looking there again. You're not looking through life. And once I was able to transition enough to looking through life, that made a big difference.
Mhm.
For, where's the life in this? If there's no life in it, there's no love in it, there's no light in it, then that's not something I want to be involved in. It's darkness. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, totally.
yeah.
Well, Miss Laura, this
Did we,
conversation,
did we actually get anything accomplished?
oh, I think this did, and I think it will be, as our friend Lou says, very nourishing for
Yes.
those.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well,
guys, we're gonna hang up on you because we want to have girl talk,
yeah.
and we will have another video for you in a week or two. Bye.